Hey, so welcome to another Run Wild with Us. Ask us whatever the heck you want. I'm Lisa Kastner. I'm the founder and executive editor of Running Wild Press. And I join you usually about once a week on Thursdays, 5 p.m. Pacific time, 8 p.m. Eastern time, to answer any kind of questions that you may have. We also typically also have some of our editors online as well, depending on what their availability is. I'm pretty sure this week we will be joined by Peter Wright, who's one of our editors, as well as one of our acquisition editors, as well as Ben White, who is also one of our editors, as well as an acquisition editor. Excuse me. So definitely use this as your opportunity to, again, ask us any kind of questions that you may have around the craft of writing, publishing, editing, what have you. So the easiest way to do that, though, is to go into the comments section of this here live stream and just pop in your question in that comment section. And I will be more than happy to repeat the question and then respond to it. As a heads up, I am actually traveling this week for a variety of reasons, which is why I may sound a little bit blurry right now. I actually had an overnight flight and I've been awake ever since I landed. And that's not to imply that I actually got any sleep on the flight. It just means that I haven't been asleep. It also probably means that after this live stream, I may be going to bed. So, with all of that far too much information, I look forward to your questions. Now, in the meantime, what I usually do is I will give you guys an update on some activities that we've done in the last week or so, or since the last time we talked. And I may respond to some questions that seem kind of thematic that we received since the last live stream. So since the last live stream, one really exciting thing that happened, we were at San Diego's Comic Fest. And I must admit, I knew that comic book fans, generally speaking, are huge readers. And with that said, I didn't, and I knew there was a crossover between our fans and comic book fans. But man, oh man, I really didn't anticipate the incredibly warm and generous welcome that we received. We had several of the books that we brought that actually we ran out of, including anthologies. Now, the reason I point out anthologies is, generally speaking, anthologies don't typically sell well. The only times anthologies typically sell well is if there's like a really well-known name behind the anthology, either as the editor or as one of the key writers, or if it's a theme that is just so hot where the whole world is just on top of this theme that people just can't help but pick it up. So these were actually a couple of our anthologies that are our general anthologies around that are cross-genre and are like a nice eclectic blend of different types of stories. So that was really, really exciting to see the warm welcome. I was also thrilled to see, so Tone Milazzo and his wife, Melissa Milazzo, actually, so they had published books as well. And Tone generously is the one who invited us to share a table with him and Melissa. They, like Melissa had a super fan show up and oh my gosh, it was amazing. This man, he knew her book inside and out. It was actually an analysis of the first season of True Detective. And I really invite you to go online, go on Twitter and look up Tone Milazzo because he tweets about it and does a blog about that experience. It was just amazing. And Tone's novel that we actually did publish a couple of years ago through Running Wild, that sold out as well. So we are really looking forward to the next Comic-Con. That was a Comic Fest. This is the next one's going to be a Comic-Con in Ontario, California. We anticipate that one is actually might be larger. We'll see. Again, I was surprised, which I don't know why I was surprised. But the San Diego Comic Fest, it actually also, from what I understand, sold out, and it was so packed that all the parking, they completely ran out of parking. And in reality, people had to park in the neighborhoods where they're really not supposed to be. So, and the hotel ran out of food. They ran out of coffee. I mean, when they said they were out of coffee, it was like, are you serious? You ran out of coffee? Come on, guys. But it was a lot. It was so much fun, and it was so wonderful to be around such amazing fans and just generous human beings. So I really, if you ever have a chance to go to San Diego Comic Fest, I really encourage you to do so. It is just such a wonderful experience. And again, we will be there at the next Comic Con will be at the Ontario Comic Con. I believe it's the end of May. In the meantime, my next big conference is I will be at Atlanta's Writers Conference. And that's actually, if you're a writer or an aspiring writer and you want a really honest critique, not only of, like, let's say the first 20 pages of your manuscript, but also of the pitch and the log line and the summary, I'd say definitely go for it. This is, it's in my opinion, a pretty hardcore writers conference that's very much focused on making sure that you get the most that you can out of the conference and from the individuals who you would be working with at the conference. So I actually had been sent 10 manuscripts along with the pitches and the log lines, did an honest analysis, already sent it off, and I will be meeting one-on-one with those 10 individuals. Now, what's great about this too, from a writer's perspective, is that at the end of that analysis, whether it be an agent or a publisher, they say if they want to look at the work, if they'd like to look at it after you've had an opportunity to revise it, and what have you. So it's actually a great way for you to kind of cut through the BS and get your stuff in front of someone that you may be interested in publishing with. So I really do recommend the Atlanta Writers Conference. And then after the Atlanta Writers Conference, I will then be at the Penn Writers Conference. Now, I have a long history with Penn Writers. I was on the board for years and years and years. I was actually the president of Penn Writers for a couple of years. And I am honored to be running a couple of workshops at that conference. What's nice about the Penn Writers Conference is it's very grounded, it's very down to earth, and it's actually a great way for you to have exposure to a variety of types of writers, from, huge bestsellers with, amazing fan bases. This year, I believe the keynote is Jonathan Mayberry, to more locally known authors. So again, it kind of gives you a nice variety of authors to talk to, and they do attract a decent number of agents and publishers. So again, take this opportunity, really go for it, and really, I hope you really research the conferences that you are most interested in. Now, if you are curious about a conference, like you read about it and you're like, I'm not sure, you know what, go ahead and send us a link during one of our Ask Us Anythings. And if it's one that we're familiar with, we will be happy to give you feedback on that. And with that, here's Peter. Hey, Peter, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I am doing really well. So I was just saying that I'm pretty much been traveling, which is why it looks like I'm in a hotel room, because I am. And I kind of gave an overview of my experience with San Diego Comic Fest, and how, we sold out of books, and it was, we had a lot of really great fans that came forward. I was going to ask, what's been your experience in the last couple of weeks in terms of like editing, and have you gotten any like kind of interesting questions around either the craft of writing or publishing or whatever, anything around those lines?
Well, unfortunately, nothing really comes to mind. The book that I'm working on right now is by a very talented author who I worked with previously, and the questions that I had back then, the questions that he had back then for me, he pretty much answered with this new novel, which I thought was amazing. I still had questions, of course. I always have questions, but nothing too game changing or story altering, anything like that. I am looking at a new book though. I'm curious about it. It's very dialogue heavy, so I'm gonna I have questions with questions with the author about that. But just now getting started into that, so we'll see what happens, and I'll report back like next week or the week after.
Awesome. That sounds fantastic. Yeah, I'm in the middle of editing the annual novella anthology for RIZE. And then after that, I'll start editing the annual novella anthology for Running Wild. And I'm really, really, really happy with the variety of novellas that we received, and the quality of writing. And I think they raise a lot of interesting questions around not just within the stories themselves, but also within cultures, among cultures, and like, people's motivations for their activities, which is actually interesting because during Comic Fest, I was having a conversation with Jonathan Mayberry, and we were talking about the fact that, even the world's worst villain, he had motivations for what he did that he thought were real,
right,
or
noble.
Yeah, noble. Exactly. Right. Exactly. It wasn't just like he went, what, today I want to be a bad guy. So, ta-da! I'm a bad guy, right? It doesn't work that way. Even people,
nonfiction at least.
Well, yeah. Typically people come into things and they say, here, these are the reasons why I murder someone, right? Like, no one goes into it and says, I want to murder this person because, hey, this is a great individual and everybody loves them, and so therefore I want to murder them. It doesn't work. It doesn't work that way, right? Typically, right. There's a history of reasons as to why they may feel as though this person, I don't want to say has earned to be killed. That's not what I mean. But, I can't even actually really imagine someone saying, I'm intentionally going to go forward and say, today I'm going to murder blah. I mean, I do understand that does happen, and, our court systems prove that, but they don't do it without whatever their personal reasons or intentions are. Right.
Right.
So, and what makes it more interesting is when you write stories from the perspectives of those who are considered the antagonist as well as the protagonist, because then you get to see that the antagonists are also the protagonists, depending on the viewpoint, right? And vice versa. So,
right, if you're rooting for the bad guy, then the antagonist is the guy that you're going to be concentrating on. And sometimes it's more fun to write the antagonist, to figure out, to plumb the depths of his or her character, to see why they're doing what they're doing, and to actually have fun with it, because just flat out do this isn't enough. It's not interesting for fiction. It's interesting as a story. It doesn't keep you riveted to the book, but digging into it and finding, not just the dark stuff, but also the comical stuff that just happens as a matter of life, of storytelling. I don't know, just something to look at it from different perspectives. Like, he's still a bad guy, but there is a comedic element, however small. You got to keep the other thing in there, just to keep things, somewhat inexcruciating, I guess, if that's the word.
Or varied, right? You have a nice range of emotional experiences within the work. So,
Right.
yeah, I totally agree. And then I think, well, this week I've gotten a lot of really interesting questions. Excuse me, because we sent out offers to a lot of amazing, talented authors in the last couple weeks for their full length works, and so I thought we could kind of cover some of the answers to some of those questions. And I also saw a really interesting post on Twitter where this woman said, "Oh, I've been submitting my full-length novel for years, and I finally got a response, and I decided to counter and ask for, it was something like $8,000 up front, and they rescinded the offer." Like, what the hell? I thought we were going to finagle. Okay, let's have a chat, honey bun. So, although I understand that people who, follow Twitter and follow Facebook and follow us, right? And follow YouTube, and you're on all the chats, right? And you're all on the blogs, and you're part of a community of writers, and everybody's got this opinion as to like how you should be writing and what kind of offers you should be taking and who you should be publishing with and so on. Let's have a reality check. If nobody knows you and you've never been published before and you get an offer for even like $500 and like no royalties, guess what? That's a really good offer. You know why? Nobody knows you. And this publisher is making a huge bet on you. They're making a huge bet and saying, this person's never been heard of before. Maybe they've been published here or there, but they haven't sold incredibly well, especially if it is a collection that is not a collection of stories with connected characters, meaning
Right.
like it's a bunch of short stories that are with all the same characters, but it's just a variety of short stories. They do not sell well. Period. End of like I've never heard of a short story collection or even a novella collection selling really well when the characters have nothing to do with one another among the different stories. So if you submit something like that to a publisher, especially a small publisher or a mid-sized publisher, and they make you an offer of a couple of $100, I don't know what the offer was she got, by the way, I'm making that part up, to counter and say, no, I demand $8,000 up front, you've just shot yourself in the foot. Because it's almost, in all honesty, some publishers are going to view that as a slap in the face because they know that no one knows you, right? Now, it's a different story if you are a New York Times bestseller, or if you were a Hello Sunshine book club pick, right? Or if you've been published quite a bit in other in magazines, or maybe a lot of articles have been written about you, right? Like you've been published or interviewed in a variety of ways. That is a completely different story. But if you're
known,
because then you're known, exactly.
Right.
Then you have some form of following. But if you don't have any of that, a lot of this, it's about building your fan base. So in that author placing that bet and saying, okay, I'm going to publish this person, again, that no one's ever heard of before because they're a really good writer, then they're placing a bet on you because they believe in your work. And in a lot of ways, you're placing a bet with them by saying, okay, they're giving me an opportunity for my writing to be in a lot more venues than has been made available previously, right?
Right.
And that actually leads to the other big question that I've gotten this past week. which is what are you going to do for me in terms of marketing and publicity? Okay, that's another one of like, let's have a chat. So this is a partnership. Oh, and this is my view, right? You're going to talk to other publishers. You're going to talk to other agents who may have a completely different viewpoint. And that is completely copacetic. They're supposed to, right? Because we're all human beings. We all have different experiences and so on. But a lot of this isn't about what is the publisher going to do for you. It's about what you're both going to do to make the work successful. So my suggestion is, instead of walking into a meeting with a publisher and saying, are you going to put out ads about my work? Are you going to, spend tens of thousands of dollars or $100,000 on an ad campaign? Are you going to go out and do a Twitter campaign? Are you going to do a campaign with the American Library Association or on Goodreads or whatever? Because, you did research, and on your research, you saw that huge bestsellers did like Goodreads campaigns. Instead of taking that approach, my suggestion is asking, what kind of resources does the publisher or can the publisher make available to you so that you can flesh out your campaign, and then work with the publisher on what that campaign is going to look like. Because the reality is, there are tons, like Goodreads doesn't want to hear from me. They want to hear from you. They want to hear from the author, right? Amazon doesn't want to hear from me. Amazon wants to hear from the author. American Library Association, yeah, they want to hear from me, but I need your help. And they want to hear from Peter, right? But Peter and we need your help in identifying, like, what are the themes that we would even bring forward to the American Library Association, right? What recommendations can we make in order to help the sales, right? Those kinds of things. We can't go in blind. We're not going to just simply magically know and understand exactly where the best places are to position the work. So it's probably better not to go in with a confrontational approach, especially if this is a publisher that you're hoping to have a long-term relationship with. You may want to actually have more of an approach of, hey, if this is true, right? If this is not true, then, just say what's true for you. But like, if you're not familiar with marketing, just say, hey, I'm not really familiar with this. Can you help me find resources so that I can be stronger in this capacity?
Right. The keywords of what you're saying, and you're making very good points, obviously, but keywords to me is working with the publisher, working with the editor. I'm coming in with preset demands, and I don't know where these demands came from. I've been doing this for 15, 20 years, and I've never heard anybody say, go in screaming, go in blazing, demand all that you can get. Like you said, we're taking a chance on the book. We're taking a chance on the writer, and we get hundreds of submissions, as does every reputable press, from the small ones like us to the bigger ones. And, just the bigger you get, the more submissions you get. So if you get an offer to publish and you come in saying, well, I want this and I want this, and what are you going to do for me? And stand back with your arms crossed, get all haughty. It's like, well, you're telling us that A, you're not easy to work with. B, kind of agenda that you have no idea what the publishing world is like, or we most likely don't know as much about the publishing world as you do, or as much as I do, kind of thing, from the inside of it. So coming in and demanding, you're saying you're not easy to work with, you're confrontational. It's a horrible first impression. And that kind of taints the work to a degree. Would you agree with that?
Oh, 100%. And unfortunately, it sets a tone where, we're coming in with the intent of, we want to match you. And I'll talk about that's the other big question that I've gotten. Like, how do we pick editors and all that kind of stuff. we intentionally set this up so that it's somebody, your editor is someone who has read your work and they're passionate about it. And they're like, hey, this rocks. I want to see this person successful. I want to see them have, millions of readers, right? This is fabulous. Or, I want to bring it up to that, whatever that next level is.
Right.
And so if you come in and you're like, well, I researched you and I only saw you here, here, and here, that's not really a smart play. Or no, or the other one that I got a couple times in the last couple weeks was, can you send me samples of your work? May I please suggest that you Google us to find out what we have accomplished and where we've been, as well as what, if what kind of bad reviews we've gotten, right?
Well, there's also the option to actually buy the books that we've published. The Ward Kirkestad reviews, and as well as the lesser popular ones, to see what we do publish. It's like, you've read what we've done, so read the actual stories to get an idea. Don't ask us to tell you. I mean, we're doing that's show not tell. I mean, we're not going to tell you. You got to do the research on your own. I figured you would do the research before you even contacted us to know what kind of stories we like.
Right, exactly. So, I think Peter and I have said this numerous times in the past, and I'm sure if you're someone who watches this frequently, you're like, oh God, they're saying this again. But do your homework, right? And it's not that hard today. I mean, I remember back when there wasn't an internet, right? I remember when you'd have to go to the library to do any kind of research, and you actually had to physically pull books out, right? You don't have to do that anymore. You could just Google it. So, it's so easy. Just do your homework and find out what the publisher's about. It's also not smart. It's not a good play to say, I looked at your contract. I sent it to an editor, a lawyer, attorney, which you should, right? But then to follow that up with, so is there something in there I need to be concerned about? So that statement implies that you think that the editor and the publishing house is setting you up in that contract and is trying to do something illicit. If that's what you really think, then you shouldn't even be talking to them.
No.
Again, I fully understand that there are publishers that don't have the best of intentions. Don't get me wrong, but if you don't have warm fuzzies when you talk to a publisher, and if you look at a contract and you don't think it's something that you're interested in, then just say no.
Right. Walk away.
Just walk away. Now, I'm going to go back to what we were talking about in the beginning too, though. Know what you're talking about, right? So if you walk away because, like, we are blessed, and our authors are blessed because we have amazing partnerships with the likes of the Alliance Agency to license stories to other forms, right?
Right.
We have an amazing advisory board that includes everything, individuals who are like SVPs of film studios to, again, the Alliance Agency,
authors.
To huge best-selling authors who help advise us on the best ways that we can bring your stories to life in a variety of forms. So if you look at the contract and you see that and you decide, you know what, I don't want any of that, right? I want to do other stuff, then that's fine. Then you should go with someone who's going to give you what you want. But come in understanding what it is that you want, and come in with questions that'll help draw out the intention behind the contract, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense because you want to know what's going on with the contract, and of course, sending it to an attorney is fine. I think it's a bit overkill because we're not out to screw anybody. We're out to just publish their works. It's more of a goodwill business than a negative aspect, because I mean, are we making tons of money selling books, like millions of dollars yet? No. So it's still kind of a personal project on all our parts that you began as it's growing into what it is now, which is amazing. But we're looking for the stories. I mean, that's what I keep coming back to. It's always the story. It's not the author. It's not what you're going to do after it's published. It's what you're going to do until it gets published, and then you move on to the next phase. But you look at things in sequence. I don't know if this is a good segue from what you were speaking about. It just came to mind, but figure find somebody you want to work with.
Mm-hmm.
Agree to a contract, agree to terms, which are very fair. See what other presses are offering. If you have other offers or other bids, by all means, compare the two. That means more than one person is interested with more than one point of view. So that's a very good thing. And then edit the work. Look at it in piecemeal, because the writing of the book, I heard this years ago, and it turned out to be so true. But the writing of the book is only about 5% of the process.
Mm-hmm.
You get the book written, and then the process starts. Then the behemoth gets going, and it moves into production and then printing and with cover art and all the other aspects that I know a little bit about, but not much. But there's so many aspects of it that you can't control, that you need to trust other people who do doing. Trust our opinion, trust our guidance, kind of thing.
And if you want to have that kind of control and self-publish, and there's so many venues available now to self-publish, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, you want to talk about there.
Seriously.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's interesting. I forget who I was talking to. Oh, I was actually talking to one of the bigger booksellers this past weekend at San Diego Comic Fest. And they get thousands a week of new title announcements. Thousands. Not 10, not 20, not 100, right? And so, a lot of the reason why, like, the marketing and the publicity and all that is so important today, it's to help you figure out, what is different, what makes your story stand out compared to the other 1,000 that came out that week.
Right.
And I know that that's not easy, believe me. Like, I'm the last person to claim that's an easy thing to do, which is why you have, like, your editor there to kind of help you think things through, or your beta readers, right? Or why it's so important to send it out for blurbs. But to Peter's point, that's what, all those activities really are just so imperative for your work to get the attention that it deserves. So
yeah, there's so many things fighting for our attention. TV, movies, magazines, podcasts, the list goes on, much more so than it was even 10 years ago. So like you were saying, what makes your book special? What makes it stand out? What can we say, this needs to be read because of this? Mm-hmm. One of my teachers, Richard Bausch, a fantastic author, he said, why must the silence be broken? Why are you even writing? Why did you even start this story? Why must the silence be broken? Why are you making this? Why are you bringing it into the world? If it matters that much, make it matter that much. If that makes sense,
Yep.
Break the silence for a reason. Don't just write a book to say, okay, I'm writing a book. Have it be that much better.
Yep, totally. Don McIntyre asks, what do you guys think about the value of beta readers?
I think they're very, very helpful, very valuable if you've got them. Absolutely. After a couple of drafts, show it to a couple of beta readers, get their opinions on what's working, what isn't working. Because as I've told authors I work with, you're going to miss things. You're not going to see everything that's in the story that could be in the story. So absolutely, I would send it out to beta readers if I could.
I completely agree. My one, not really caveat, but I guess like an addendum, be very intentional with who your beta readers are. And the reason I say that is, like, let's say you just wrote a literary thriller and you send it to a friend of yours who offered to be a beta reader, but that friend really reads romances. They're not going to give you the feedback that you're looking for. Change that. It's highly unlikely they're going to give you the feedback that you're looking for. Really be sure that the beta readers you select are individuals who read or write or both in the genres that you are writing in, or familiar enough that they can give an unbiased opinion with that, whatever those genres are, that framing in mind when they're reading your work. So I hope that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Very much.
And the only reason I say that is because I've seen far too many aspiring authors, just kill themselves because they had a beta reader, or they had an instructor, or they knew someone who generously offered to read their work, and they didn't realize that the individual this wasn't their wheelhouse. They really weren't knowledgeable regarding that genre or that kind of story, and gave feedback that not that it wasn't pertinent, but it didn't really strengthen the story with what the intention of the story was, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. They're going at it with their preconceived notions of what they're expecting to read, and they're giving it to you, with their biased opinions, which is what you're looking for. But then if you take that in, taking Cousin Robbie's input about it not being a romance novel, you could add this and this and this, and you start writing it to please him, and then some more feedback comes in from another author, from another beta reader, and you start to please them, then you completely lose the purpose of your book. You're pleasing the people. You're pleasing people who don't have your intent at heart.
Yep, 100%. I totally agree. So, Dawn, I hope that was helpful. This also reminds me, I wanted to talk to you guys about something that I've, in the last couple of months, I'd say like the last 6 months, I've realized the importance of. So one is around blurbs and also around reviews. So I'm going to pull the curtain back a little bit behind the B2B aspects of publishing and distribution. So when you see a book on the New York Times bestseller list, do you know how it's named to the New York Times bestseller list?
Why? No.
Yeah.
No, I do not know.
So when I found this out, I actually found this out years ago, but I didn't connect dots until, I want to say, after I had like a beer and a whiskey in the last couple of months, and went, oh, that's how that works. So New York Times bestseller list is actually based on the pre-orders for books by retailers. So what that means is, so let's say Peter wrote an amazing novel, right? And it's going to come out in the next 6 months. And it gets a lot of attention by Barnes and Noble and by his local booksellers, and so on. And they all pre-order 100,000 in totality copies, if not more. That will put him on the New York Times bestseller list. That doesn't mean 100,000 copies sold. It means that 100,000 copies were pre-ordered to sell.
Right.
So that's part one. Part two is, how do they even get to the point of saying, oh, I want to order in bulk? And how does the manufacturer know to say, oh, we want to manufacture over 100,000 copies? this is also where it gets kind of interesting. So from the retailer's perspective, they want validation that this story is worth their time and that people are going to seek it out, or if they do some kind of special, that it's going to get attention. So a lot of times what kind of draws that, what pushes that forward, is when the book, whether it be a complete unknown author or an up-and-comer, if they have a lot of reviews and really positive reviews from already known authors, and if they have a lot of, and blurbs, and if they have a lot of reviews from well perceived blogs or places like Publishers Weekly or Kirkus, or like LA Times or the New York Times, when these retailers see that for them is validation. Okay, this is worth my time, and I want to buy 10, 15, 20, 50 copies, right? If your book hasn't gotten that attention, then it's highly unlikely that they're going to do this. Now, I know what I just said is intimidating, right? Because, we've all written things that one guy over here said, oh my God, this is phenomenal. And then this guy over here was like, what a piece of crap. Who thought that this could even be put on in paper, right? So I'm not saying, intentionally put your tushy out there so that you can, be at risk of being publicly flagellated by somebody. That is not what I'm saying. I'm saying you have to actually put in the work to get the reviews and to get the blog posts and to get those blurbs from individuals. And you need to be smart about how you target it to those groups that are higher likely to give you a good review. So like if you wrote a dark fiction piece, you don't want to go to a romance reviewer or like, a Shakespearean reviewer. You want to make sure that you're putting this in front of reviewers that have a higher likelihood of giving you a really good review. And then you want to publicize the hell out of those good reviews. So that then encourages the retailers to pre-order. Then because all those pre-orders are coming in, the distributor will say, hey, did you realize there are all these pre-orders coming in for this book? You should probably order like double or triple to have in the warehouse in preparation for when this sells even more. So I know this sounds like a game, and in some ways it is, but it really, really, really highlights the importance of the author having skin in the game and really working hard with the publisher in getting those reviews and getting that exposure. So does that make sense? You think, yeah. Peter? Or...
Do whatever you can to get the buzz generating, to get publishers interested. Anything helps. Blogs, going on, being a guest on a blog or whatever. Get interviewed by as many people as you can. Go do readings like our authors do. Anything you can do to get the word out there that this book is really good and needs to be read. Generate more excitement for it.
Yeah, 100%. So Dawn McIntyre asks, how does the author locate these reviewers? That's actually a fabulous question. I'm actually a huge advocate of emulating success. So what I mean by that is, if you know that you've written a magical realism piece with dark elements, and you're a big fan of, works that are similar to what you just wrote, going and either reaching out directly to the authors and asking them, hey, how did you set up your marketing campaign? Or how did you identify those reviewers? or just simply seeing where they got reviewed. And by seeing where they got reviewed and who reviewed them well and who did not review them well, that gives you a roadmap of where you can seek out reviews. Another great way of handling it is reaching out to your friends who are also in that same camp in terms of whatever genres you write in, and asking them where they think are good spots to have your work represented, and they can kind of help you seek that out. So I hope that's helpful. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm like thinking out loud. Another really good one, if you are familiar or you're friendly with well-known authors, like Peter and I both got MFAs, right? So a lot of our instructors or like guest instructors were, really well-known authors. Reach out to them and ask them, different ways that you can bring your work forward. And the reason I say that is they know your writing is actually probably better than you do, because they were your mentors and instructors for 2 years or however long. So right. They can look at it and say, oh, you know what? You should go to Chautauqua, or you should go to, the LA Times Book Festival, or you should do, talk to my buddy over here. And they can help you flesh out what that campaign would actually look like, both from a reviewer perspective, but also even just from a, like, what bookstores do you want to, where do you want to do book signings? What libraries do you want to target? What booksellers do you want to target? What are some creative ways that you can promote your work? So an example is, and again, this is just, in retrospect, it's like, why, gosh, that's common sense. But, common sense a lot of times isn't often all that common. Is reach out to a well-known author and ask them if they would be willing to do a Q&A or like a guest signing with you. Because the fans of that well-known author are going to come forward because for the well-known author, but you're there too. Right. So it's not like they're going to be like, and like walk away because you're present. Most likely they're going to give you a shot because this fabulous, well-known author is backing you by doing this Q&A or doing this book appearance at the same time as you. So.
Cool. Exactly. You'd be like the opening act for like a concert. You be the opening band, you do your reading, then they do their reading, and then you do the Q&A. So they have to hear your words because they're waiting to hear his words. One thing I'm finding, though, is the receptiveness of well-known authors to be to network. Because I've reached out on LinkedIn and Facebook to authors I've read and just astonished at how good the book was, and they accepted my request. So they linked back in with me. And my network is growing, just not as fast as I'd like it to be, but it's still growing. Be amazed how receptive people are, and how helpful well-known authors can be if they have the time.
And actually, that's an excellent point. Don't wuss out just because you're a huge fan of somebody, right? If you're a huge fan of someone, you should reach out to them, say, hey, I'm a huge fan. I loved X, Y, and Z. I'd love to be friends on Facebook or on LinkedIn or on Twitter. If you wrote a short story or a novella or a novel or a nonfiction piece and, you'd love them to read it, ask them. Don't wait 2 weeks before the book's about to be published to ask them. Be smart about it. Like, give them like 6 months before or something like that, so that there isn't pressure on them. Because remember, most of the time, if this is a really well-known author, this is that author's full-time job. So they're not just sitting around twiddling their thumbs. They're working their butts off, writing constantly. And so they have deadlines that they have to meet. So, acknowledge that, be smart about it. And again, you would be shocked, to Peter's point. The number will turn around and say, you know what, I would be more than happy to read your work minimally. And then if they can, they'll review it. And if they can't, hey man, at least you had an opportunity to talk to them, and it doesn't mean they won't review you in the future, right?
Exactly. And to your point, I mean, if you reach out to an author you admire, there may be aspects of your writing that mimic the author's writing because that's the style that you are drawn to. So that kind of correlation would work too.
Exactly. I've actually heard of quite a few. I say aspiring, but I just mean like not huge authors yet, who they reached out to a well-known author, or they, maybe they got published in a small magazine that is followed by a lot of, well-known authors, or, maybe they reached out to a well-known author or someone that they admire and asked them to look at something. And then, fast forward 3, 6, 12 months, and the author says, hey, would you be interested in co-writing something with me? Or, co-editing something with me? Or I'm editing this anthology. Would you be interested in submitting a work to the anthology? So, to Peter's point in the beginning, it's making that connection, making them know that you exist, and the quality of your work. And then just, being a good human being, and just keeping that relationship, that friendship alive. So, it is, I can't believe how fast this went. Probably because I was ranting a good portion. But we only have 7 minutes left, guys. So if you have any questions, please feel free to go ahead and pop them in the comments section of this live stream. Now, if this is not Thursday between 5 p.m. Pacific time and 6 p.m. Pacific time, or 8 p.m. Eastern time and 9 p.m. Eastern time, this is not a big deal. Go ahead. Pop your question in the comments section, because we always go back and look at the questions to see if there's anything that that we may have missed in previous sections. So, and I was going to say something, and now I can't remember.
Is there are you finding there's a theme in the novella anthology that you're working on?
It's interesting. I think when Ben first started working on the not the novella anthologies, on the short story, there was a lot of like, it's the end of the world, very pandemic-ish stuff. And that's not surprising, right? We've all been in the middle of this pandemic for 2.5 years now. Like, I would be shocked if they didn't have that theme. I think there has been a lot of stories around like isolation and people getting themselves out of isolation. And that could be a physical isolation. It could be an emotional isolation. It could be a cultural isolation. And again, that's not surprising, right? Because we've all been in some form of isolation for the last 2.5 years. They just haven't necessarily been actual pandemics. So.
Cool.
How about, did you feel like we had any themes in the stories that we just finished reviewing?
At this point, I can't even venture a guess because we went through them so quickly, and there were so many different styles and different voices and different plots. I have to go through and just see if there was a theme, because honestly, it blurred by me both sessions. I mean, it was a fun blur, but it was It's just bam, 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 next book, bam, 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 next book, bam, 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 next book. We got through 77 books the first time, 36 or 40 the second time.
Yeah.
And fantastic exercise, blew through the slush pile, got back to the authors. That's another thing. I don't even think I brought this up last time we were talking about the sessions that we did. Is this tells the author that maybe we don't like we don't want to accept what they've written, but we're getting back to them in a reasonable time. They're not waiting 6 months, 8 months, a year or more to hear back what's going on with my novel, because that's kind of where I was at with some publishers back then when I was first writing. But this gives them the ability to say, okay, well, this one's done. Close the book, close the door on that one, and then move on to the next. So they have an idea what's going on. What we would choose versus what we would turn back to get another revision or another draft before we look at it again.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I want to make a suggestion. Although I'm incredibly complimented when people reach out to us and let us know that they're big fans of some of the novels that we've published or the stories that we've published, and they really want to publish with us. Know that we are doing our best in getting back to you in a timely manner. And in all honesty, if we haven't gotten back to you yet, it means it's still being under consideration. And with that too, I ask, please don't look up my personal phone number and decide to call me to have a conversation about your work. Again, I understand. No, I'm a writer too, right? I'm an editor. I'm a writer. I started this publishing because there's so many amazing and fantastic stories out there. They just aren't getting the attention that they need, or they're not finding the right editor to help them get to that, that next level. And that's what we're all about, right? Is really bringing great stories to life, changing the world through story. But it's not productive to look up my personal information and use that as a tool to try and force your work to the public. So
that's a bad first impression.
Yeah, it's a bad first impression. So
crossing lines you should not be crossing.
Yeah, exactly. So I ask, please send your work through Submittable, follow our guidelines, follow the recommendations that we're making. And please know that we are, we're doing our best in responding to your submission in a timely manner. And we really do thank you for your patience with that. And all of us, Peter's a writer, I'm a writer. I don't know a single one of our editors who isn't a writer. We actually have a couple who are also agents on the side. So, know that we get it, man, right? We are right there with you. We are living it as well. But please follow the guidelines that are being presented for your works to be considered. So, and with that, I think we are out of time. Thank you for listening to I feel like all I did was rant tonight because I'm tired.
Let me talk a little bit.
Yeah, you got to talk for about 2 seconds. But with that, Peter, thank you so much. It's been, as always, it's an amazing, huge pleasure to do and ask me anything with you. And guys, please go ahead, pop your questions in the comments section. We will look at them up. We will look at them up. Fabulous. We'll look at them in the coming days and weeks. We thank you for checking us out. And I wish you an absolutely phenomenal week. And we can't wait to read your stories. And we hope that you continue being partners with us in this ever evolving and amazing world of storytelling. So thanks, guys.